And I have to mute. So at some point, this thing's gonna like blow up on on YouTube. The sound's gonna explode, so I'm gonna have to mute it. So, welcome everybody to another episode of Professional Novice with Ali Rizvi. My name is Ali Rizvi. I need to stop saying that. I repeat it all the time. And and so right now, what we're going to talk about is something that I've been really interested in. I think that everybody has been interested in, especially people who've been traumatized by 2016, and they're still going through PTSD. Well, when it comes to that, is it justified? There are two questions here. Will Trump win again? And that's the title of this episode. And can Trump win again? Right. And I think we have the perfect person to talk about this with us today. So Mookie Spitz is a friend of mine. We've been working together for what I think like 7 years or something. I've known you for a long time. He is a marketing and PR strategy maestro. He specializes in healthcare, in nonprofits, in politics. He is a writer who writes on Medium. He is a rock guitar player. We'll talk about that a little bit later too. And he was fired by presidential candidate Andrew Yang. So he had an encounter with Andrew Yang. He worked at it, and he seems very proud of it. But anyway, we'll get into that.
Yeah. I'm not sure if it qualifies for a firing if I wasn't officially hired, but I was summarily dismissed in a way which is extremely entertaining and also potentially enlightening for this conversation. So it'll be some fodder for us to chat about for sure.
So anyway, so we want to talk about, I mean, we're both, Mookie's in New York City, right? So he's been locked down, in New York City. It was once the epicenter of the whole coronavirus pandemic. So we're going to talk about that and also how that plays into the election that's coming up. We want to talk about the election. We want to talk about the polls, the pandemic, what Joe Biden needs to do, what he's doing wrong, what he's doing right, what Trump's doing wrong, what he's doing right. But yeah, Spitz is pretty much my go-to guy when I want to cut through all the noise and really understand what's happening in this. Well, it's the wild west of American presidential politics, and right now the U.S. it's got quite a reputation around the world. It's I read somewhere, I think there was a tweet that said the U.S. is the Florida of the world. Take that as you will.
Exactly. I saw a wonderful meme that said that the world is looking at the U.S. in the same way that the U.S. watched Tiger King.
Oh my God!
It's quite a folly, quite an embarrassment, a mixture of pity and befuddlement. But that factors in well to our conversation vis-a-vis Trump and some of the paradoxical messaging and communication that he's been doing. And I think that's fascinating and worthy of some great discourse. I love the fact too that you're Canadian. You're looking at it from the hat of the United States, looking on down, right? And I've been in the thick of it. Obviously, in New York, grew up in Chicago, lived in LA. So our various perspectives have been really, really exciting in terms of our interaction. And some of our feuds and bets and opportunities for hopefully sharing and spreading the word in terms of what's coming in November.
Yeah. So we do have a few bets, and we're going to talk about that as well. But I kind of wanted to start with that. So I'm up here in Canada. For me, it's entertainment, right? I have two siblings in the U.S. I have a sister-in-law who's American, born and raised. It's been and I've noticed that there's a difference. Like for me, a lot of this can be funny. I can see, like, there was a sign outside some UK pub that I saw that said, all Americans must be accompanied by an adult.
Yes.
Right.
And so it's good advice for our international listeners. And if we could even make it, because we've already been banned from most of our allies and much of the first world because they don't want us because of our infection rate. Mexico actually shut down part of the border. They were terrified of infected Americans, coming across.
You're not sending your best people. That's what's going on. You're not sending your best.
Well, we do our best. Some
Yeah,
of us are okay.
yeah, but it is more serious for you because I mean you're living that, and I'm thinking if I was there and I was in this situation where you're kind of being looked at this way by the rest of the world. I mean, we're making natural selection jokes when we see how the Republican convention is going as planned in Jacksonville,
Absolutely.
Florida, of all places. But you're actually there. You were in the in the epicenter of this pandemic. You probably know people who've been infected. You probably know people who've had or heard of people who've died from this and gotten seriously sick. It's it's a tough situation. I think we forget that there are a lot of the majority of Americans did not vote for Trump. Okay, the majority of Americans didn't. The way that this pandemic was handled, the huge majority of Americans, based on the polls, completely disapprove of how badly it's been handled. So there's so many factors.
Be careful of statistics, and we're going to talk about numbers in a second too, to show how they're fairly deceptive, and also be careful of emotion, because that cuts both ways. Emotionally, it's been highly traumatic, almost cataclysmic. Here in New York City, we peaked at 850 deaths per day in late April. I mean, here in my Stuytown apartment on the east side, nonstop sirens all day long. We felt like we were literally in a war zone. So that heightens a sense of desperation, almost existential crisis. And to your point, since 2016, really on both sides of the political aisle, it's been unprecedented in terms of the stakes, the energy level. But we need to be cautious when we're trying to take a look at strategy, especially political strategy. Because although emotions ultimately influence the voter, and everything about political campaigns are geared around behavioral change in an emotional vector, those emotions can be extremely deceptive when it comes to strategy and punditry, right? Implicit bias will drive a voter to make a decision. And obviously, it's Trump's forte to build that up and express it, right? Make it come alive. But implicit biases also deeply affect people like us who try to analyze all this, make predictions, and make conclusions. So, on the one hand, we are in the thick of it. On the other hand, as Americans, we need to be especially careful about letting our own emotional biases influence our cognitive conclusions about what could or should be done from a political messaging and strategy vantage point. And I think that that's going to be a theme that we can talk about, which is dissecting the emotion from what is strategically proven to work. And my angle of attack as a marketer and a PR person, it's what I brought to Andrew Yang, it's what I like to profess, is it's not really about the ideology. It's not so much about the emotion per se that you bring to it, but it's about the ownership and transformation of the mindset of your audience, and in this case, the voter. And what's fascinating to me about Trump in terms of how he's manifested his brand and how he's consistently clung to that ideal is that the guy is still on point. Bravo, Donald J. You've debauched the American presidency, but also demonstrated vividly to a generation of American pundits, but also the voting electorate, that political sensibility and the action of voting is absolutely no difference than a consumer walking through a shopping aisle and making a decision about a brand choice. Donald knew this from the beginning, and as an outsider, he was catapulted into this volatile maelstrom of American politics. And from the beginning, when he rolled down that escalator, and many of us are laughing and jeering, he has intuitively understood and honored the essential precepts of marketing success. And I think we need to look at it through that vantage point. So I appreciate the tangent of talking about emotion and talking about what Americans are dealing with right now. But I think part of the problem that we're facing, and what's extremely important, especially for the Democrats to understand rolling into November, is that they need to separate their own emotions from this, and they need to take a look at what's going on strictly from a strategic vantage point with the essential principles of marketing and communication. You can't get away from that.
Yeah, so he has been. This is one thing about Trump. So he was born with that silver spoon in his mouth. He was born to a really rich guy, but he went out, and every time, I remember my mom used to watch Trump on Larry King Live, and she always loved him. And the more he boasted about himself, he's like, well, I'm a genius. I've done this, I've done that. She's like, I really like that. I like the way he does it. He would go on those debate stages, right? The primaries in 2015 and 2016. And he would, like, the audience of people who just wanted to see what he would say, he talks about ratings all the time, and he does get ratings. So he's done it in the real estate market in New York. He's done it with his TV show with Celebrity Apprentice. He is able to really, really sell things. He's able to play the media, right? And playing the media, I think, is one of the most important things here. Like, when John F. Kennedy and Nixon had that debate, the first televised presidential debate ever, right, in U.S. history, was, and I'm sure you know about it, where JFK went in. He was a young guy, and they said, "Okay, we got to put on makeup." And Nixon's like, "I'm not gonna put on makeup. I'm not wuss." And then, well, we probably used other more colorful language to describe that. But he was sweating. He was pulling at his collar and all this other stuff. And it turns out that people who watched the debate thought JFK won, and people who heard it on the radio thought Nixon won, right, based on the polling. So JFK knew how to play the new media of the time. That was a new media at the time.
Absolutely.
And this guy, he has the same kind of handle on the new media of this. I mean, he could just, John Bolton's book says that he tweeted about the Khashoggi killing, right? The Saudi journalist who was killed in Turkey. He tweeted about that, and he defended the Saudis killing a journalist.
Gotcha. Let's divide this into two, though. There's two things going on.
But let me just talk about what he would do. That tweet of defending that killing was a distraction from news that had broken that Ivanka Trump was using her personal email for official business, which is exactly what Hillary Clinton did. Right?
I got you. I'm totally with you. I'm just suggesting that, you're spot on, but there's two things going on. There's the natural charisma and what we would consider affinity for a celebrity, a personality, a brand, right? Right. And that could be innately appealing because you're triggering the emotional resonance of your audience in a way that they can relate to. So at the end of the day, every brand creates a flattering reflection of its consumer. So when I see Trump, to your mom's point, that's a guy I like. That's a guy I can relate to. There's an emotional connectivity. That's really, really significant. But what's important for our conversation goes beyond just that physical and emotional connection. It goes into your tweet mention strategically, is that Trump has been on brand with regard to what he's been saying and not only how he's been saying it from day one. Mm-hmm. And I think that often gets lost in this picture of punditry, the Morning Joe crowd who are now writing Trump off. Similar to how they, were writing him off before, although they were ahead of the game in terms of finally understanding that he could actually be a contender.
Well, I mean, they were also quite taken with him in the beginning because they were personal friends with him, and they enjoyed the media circus and everything that was going on. I mean, there is an element of entertainment to this. It is an entertainment thing, and people did come out for that. I mean, Morning Joe was one of the shows where these guys, both Joe and Mika, they were friends with the guy. They had him on the show. They gave him probably more free airtime and free
Well, that's been Trump's magic. They've calculated billions of dollars of free airtime. And then CNN on down have been embracing him as as an active participant because they get more clicks, they get more ads, and that's the reality of it based upon his personality. So regardless what you think about him, he's likable, he's accessible. He speaks in a colloquial, very American style, right? He's the billionaire next door. He's the regular guy you can have a beer with. And most significantly, he embodies the sensibility that got wrapped into the Make America Great Again, white man's burden, right? Manifest destiny message about what America could or should be. So fast forward now to the consternation and mystery surrounding his horrific pandemic response, this anti-scientific and idiotic clinging to the notion as basic as mask wearing. And you scratch your chin. I go, what is this guy doing, right? Why is he talking about washing machines and light bulbs when 138,000 Americans have already been killed? Right?
Beans.
Yeah, beans.
Well, not recently,
why is there absolutely no integrated federal response to a global pandemic that hasn't happened in a century, right? And why is he doing these apparently counterintuitive things that otherwise would be so simple, right? Get an integrated database, hire up the military for PPE, embrace the CDC, be that good guy so we're all in it together. And that is why he's not doing it. It's not about being all in it together. It's not about unity. It's about differentiation. And when you're selling a brand or a product, your number one goal is to differentiate yourself within the mind of the buyer. And Trump intuitively has understood that divisiveness and separation have been key to his success. And his ability to parachute out of the sky and enter the American political system as a complete outsider, devoid of any real tact or taste or etiquette, empowered him to say things that divide us, that trigger people in ways no other politician ever has. And his poll results early on reflected that, and his victory in 2016 also reflected that. And I think that's something that we need to focus on now, which is through the lens of clearly defining who you are and what you represent, maniacally sticking to that brand identity. He feels, and intuitively he might be right, that that's his best shot for winning. Because when people decide, it's clear who is who and what is what, and we know what we're getting, he tells it like it is. And Democrats, on the other hand, are like, nah, this is madness. It's crazy. But it's not about being right or wrong. It's like a relationship when you get into an argument with your girlfriend or your wife, right? It's not about who's right or wrong in an emotionally charged human situation. It's about both of us being better or accomplishing what we're trying to do in a relationship. It's completely identical in a political situation like this. It's not about being right. It's about capturing the mind and heart of the electorate. It's about having a singular message and sensibility that everyone can relate to. And Trump has realized that divisiveness and division are the way to do that. And he's continuing relentlessly on this path of brand differentiation. And from a strategist point of view, makes sense to me. We're, to your emotional point, we're dying here, right? The South and Southwest are record numbers. We had 77,000 new cases in the United States yesterday. So when Trump made that comment, I could shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and still be adored by my followers. That is literally proving itself to be true day in, day out in the United States because, again, just from an epidemiological point of view, our horrific preparedness and even more disastrous response to this pandemic is literally resulting in the death, unnecessary death of thousands of Americans. And yet, the governor of Georgia has just fought his AG, right, about a mask rule.
I know.
We have active protests. Right.
So I wanted ask you on this, so you're talking about the marketing point of view, and I agree with you. I think that when it comes to his marketing and his strategy, and getting consumers to think and feel a certain way, using divisiveness to sort of up his brand and differentiate himself, completely on board with that. But I want to ask, are you because I remember when we talked about this in 2016, I know that you didn't think that Trump was going to win the primaries, and later on, you just didn't feel like Americans would actually go out and buy that. Okay, now do you think that is this too cynical a view of the American public, the American electorate? Because I know he got 63 million votes in 2016, and he rides everything on that. He's like, I won. This is what helped me win. And now I'm going to keep on doing the same thing, and it's going to help me win again. The polls were wrong then. The polls are going to be wrong now. But is it possible? And, because that's a sample size of one. I mean, that does not happen in every election. That's why it's called an upset. Okay. So is it possible he's kind of putting everything on what happened in 2016? Now, 63 million votes, the number of votes that he got is less than what Dukakis got in 1988 against George H.W. Bush. It's less than what Mitt Romney got in 2012. I mean, it's not a huge number. It's less than what Hillary Clinton got, the number of votes. And yes, I know the Electoral College is what matters, and the president is not democratically elected. He's constitutionally elected, sure. But there are many other reasons that he lost in 2016. And I think the two main ones were, number one, people didn't really like Hillary Clinton that much. They weren't super psyched about her. They thought she was kind of meh. The second thing was that liberals were very complacent. They just elected and reelected the first black president ever in any white majority country in the world. It was the first time in history that happened, and they did it twice. So they were moving on to the veganism and the trans pronouns and all these other things, because they're like, okay, it's over. The transformation's already happened. We were transformed. There's no way this fucknut's going to come and to turn all of that upside down. But so a lot of them stayed home, and I can't remember who said it, but there's a journalist who said that black people helped Trump get elected by staying at home, whereas with Obama they came out in droves. Because people just weren't excited about Hillary Clinton. Now, one of the biggest and the most interesting, and we should talk about the polls as well, because we're going to refer to them a lot. So we want to talk about how legitimate they are, and all of that, their integrity. But one of the most interesting pieces I've seen of polling is that in 2016, people who hated, if you look at the people who hated both candidates, like, I don't like either of them, they both suck. Those people broke massively for Trump. People who didn't like Trump and Hillary, because they had around the same disapproval ratings, they broke massively for Trump in 2016. This year, the same kind of polls among the same group of people is showing that they're breaking even more, by even a more wider margin for Joe Biden than Trump. And obviously Trump has been in power for 4 years. At that time, they wanted to try something new. Trump is no longer new. So there are, and they also have a fire under their ass. That complacency from 2016 is gone. It's the exact opposite now. I mean, people talk about, there's pro-Trump enthusiasm. There's a lot of it. The pro-Biden enthusiasm, it's not that much. But this isn't about pro-Biden enthusiasm. This is about pro-Trump and anti-Trump enthusiasm. And
that's exactly
Biden
right. Yeah.
is riding that wave. So in the context of that, I mean, can we look at 2020 as, 2016 is also the time. 2017 was when Jeremy Corbyn was really killing it and Bernie Sanders was, beating Hillary in a lot of states. I mean, that has all of that sort of far left thing that has died down as well. I mean, it's come around full circle. There's a more sort of centrist sensibility among liberals as well, and we saw that with the primaries. So there's so many things that are different from 2016. Is it fair to look at 2020 in the light of what happened in 2016?
Exactly right. Well, you opened this by saying there's two questions. Can he win?
Right.
And will he win?
Yeah.
So I've been focusing on the can part, vis-a-vis what he's doing and why he's doing it. And again, from a marketing and PR lens, what he's doing is spot on, pitch perfect for continuing the momentum and trajectory of how he started, how his base sees him, and essentially what the Trump brand is all about. Now, your question now is, will he win? And given the change in context, right, the turn of the tide, will this maniacal, divisive, implicitly racist, anti-globalist sensibility carrying him back into the White House in November? That's the magic question. To that, though, you itemize the list of how 2020 could be, and probably is very different from 2016. Trump was an unknown. He came out of the sky. Now he's got a track record. He was against Hillary, and there was all the Hillary baggage. Now he's got Biden, and Biden's got his own baggage. And as you say, less of an interest in Biden and more of an interest in just a not Trump kind
Biden's
of
also in his basement. That's the other thing. Like the more Trump talks,
which is really good, and that's why the polls, I think, are as high as they are, because it reinforces your notion that it's not pro-Biden, it's just anti-Trump. One gadfly commented that Biden should just remain in the basement, STFU, until November. And then when you go to the voting booth, you just see Trump, and then you see another box Biden, and people just shrug, well, at least he's not Trump. So Democrats save millions of dollars and just keep Joe in the basement. And then maybe by November, by default, he'll win, right? So, I agree with you across the board. But what fascinates me is that every single bullet point that you mentioned can be looked at in a contrarian point of view. So let's start with May 25th, right? You had the horrible killing of George, and then you had the resulting riots, and you have the unprecedented reaction in terms of physical protests, some violence, some vandalism on the one hand, but my inbox is now flooded with emails from the CEOs of Uber, Bank of America, telling me how much they believe in the fundamental precepts of Black Lives Matter. Wow. Okay. So that's transformative. From a NASCAR. Liberal, from a NASCAR, the Confederate flag, the statues coming down. There's clearly a state change. The zeitgeist in terms of human rights, civil rights, have reached a new plateau engendered by, people are home from the pandemic, but, the maniac in the White House who has this kind of branding. So you've got a Coke Pepsi situation. You've got crazy Trump in the White House, frothing at the mouth, right? White man's burden, manifest destiny, America first. And then you have the counter programming of the implicit, backlash that you get from the left. And it's amazing. It's transformative. And I really think it's going to stick. But everything that I've just said and that you've pointed out in terms of this transformative revitalization and quantum leap, right, in civil rights is looked at from Trump's base. And as an American, I can tell you that this is true, with shock and horror and terror. Now, many of the polls, again, Morning Joe, he cites the 12% differential. You think to yourself, well, most of America is growing up. Most of America is understanding that this is a good thing for everybody, right? Equal rights, civil rights, humanism, essence of who we are as a country.
Well, 53% of Republicans too. A majority of Republicans have also come out in favor of the protests.
For now, based on the polls. So this goes back to the 2016, right? Which is, do people really express their honest opinion when they're phoned or when they're surveyed, right? Who is actually participating in these, and how do they actually reflect the sensibility? And how will that initial wave of sympathetic reaction to something that's long overdue in terms of how this country could and should move forward dissipate, transform, and change between now and when people vote? That's the question. And I'm not saying the polls are wrong, and I'm not saying that 2020 is analogous to 2016, but I will say definitively that the Democrats should not be complacent, that this is a tacit appraisal of the sensibility of this country in a way that will be necessarily decisive in November for a Democratic victory. There's tons of implicit bias. There's a lot of racism in this country. And there's a lot of feeling that the progressive left is dangerous and personally and existentially threatening. And what Trump is doing by going all in, he's not dog whistling his racism. It is a police siren, right? And he's been unabashed about that from the beginning. Remember when he had the Muslim travel ban initially, where based upon an individual's religion, they would be barred from entering this country. In my whole life, I never heard any candidate express something so overtly un-American. I'm the child of emigres, right? Immigration is the heart of this country. And what happened to his popularity? It got boosted. So when Trump claims that Nixon's silent minority, right, is speaking again, as an American, I can tell you as a Canadian, he's on to something. There's no accident that he won, and there's no accident that there's a backlash to the backlash. The police union of the United States just categorically endorsed Donald J. Trump for president. 241,000 police officers strong, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I hear you, but when we're talking about, when you're talking about the polls, so I want to talk about like this. The idea that there's this idea that the polls didn't work in 2016. Okay, so let's just talk about the polls really quickly.
For sure.
The polls were off, right? They were off in the Rust Belt states specifically, but they weren't that far off. There are mistakes that happen. Now, you can take the position now that, okay, when 2016 the polls didn't work, so that means that the polls can't tell us anything. That's absolutely not true, because the polls do tell us a lot of things. In 2018, the polls were spot on, right, for the midterms. Before 2016, they've been spot on, countless times. Yes, of course, they've been wrong in certain cases. Even for the national vote, right? Even for the national vote, the polls showed that Hillary Clinton was going to win, and she did get 3 million more votes. So that was within the margin of error. Where they were wrong is that they underestimated his popularity in Wisconsin, in the other
where
states,
where it counted.
That's true. Where it counted. And then there is the question of how much, and now we're not talking about the public. The public's would be like, oh, come on, you're being naive. But if we really look at it, pollsters can't obviously account for last minute changes. Like, when Comey came out with that whole letter right before the election, right? That could have, there were a lot of changes that may have happened among the electorate there, specifically among the people who didn't like Hillary or Trump and who were leaning towards Trump within that demographic, right? There's changes that could have happened that they wouldn't have picked up. So we can say that the polls are wrong. I think that this thing that, the polls are always wrong, that, I think someone on my, I think it was Andrew Davis on my, on one of these threads, he said that the weatherman predicted that it was going to be it was going to rain 4 years ago, 80% chance of rain, but it was sunny all day, so that means weather forecasts are always wrong. That's obviously not how it works. So that right now, right now the polls are showing Biden with an almost 10% lead. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. 12%, I think, and only 37% of the country, approves of Donald Trump's handling of the pandemic. I mean, there's a laundry list of metrics which are favorable to Biden at this point in time. Absolutely, unequivocally correct. And are they meaningless? Are they a meaningless reflection of the American sensibility? To your point, no, it's data. Right. But, politics is more like poker, than just a computational algorithm. If I'm sitting there with a flush draw and on the board, there's a nice looking high straight, and I do a mental calculation that I've got about a 28% shot at hitting that flush with a big pot, and I look around, I might make my move. Nate Silver gave Donald Trump about a 30% shot in 2016, if I remember. And it doesn't matter. It could be up or down a few basis points. But 30% statistically, mathematically, is great. This is what gets lost in this polling madness. And it's analogous to looking at statistics in a real life perspective rather than an abstract mathematical one. 30% is a good shot, especially when the stakes are as high as being president of the United States and leader of the free world, right? So was Nate Silver batshit crazy? Did he lose his ability to do his wonderful and analytical thinking? No, he gave him 30%. 30% is winnable. 30% in Vegas makes people millionaires. So, so to address your question about polling, I agree with you, but the point I'm making, and I think what's relevant for this conversation at this point in time, even if they're accurate, are they relevant? And even if they're relevant, should it enhance the Democrats' complacency and feeling that we got this with this guy?
Of course not. I agree.
And then should it be an appraisal of Donald Trump's strategy from a pandemic response, messaging, right, and political perspective? And what I'm saying, just from my N of one, you're talking to a bald guy in New York, right? My N of one appraisal, just based on what I know and how I work with clients about marketing and messaging, is that despite the negative polling and despite the backlash even from Republicans and this befuddlement about what the hell is this crazy guy doing again, I think that Trump is totally on brand. And even though my family are vulnerable to a potentially dangerous disease, and even though I'm the first to admit that we have over 100,000 unnecessary deaths in this country because of Trump, I will just say that. I've got a background in epidemiology, and I believe that. Despite all that, it's irrelevant from a communication standpoint. Trump is doing exactly what he could and should be doing to try to win it in November, based upon how he looks at the world and based upon the essential principles of marketing. And I'll give you a specific example. If Trump decides tomorrow that he's going to give Anthony Fauci a huge hug, right? And he's going to say, we're going to create an integrated approach and we're going to have a mandatory mask rule for all of America, and basically put on his big boy pants with regard to a global pandemic. It, from this marketing point of view, has the potential to wreck his brand, right? It's reasonable. People want it. He's not showing any empathy. But at the same time, he fails to differentiate from the competition, because then he's no different than the libtards. He's no different than Biden, with whom he's competing against. His success has always been cutting a swath which has been markedly in opposition to his competition. And what he's doing now, just to try to explain it rationally, because I think it's rational and I think it's strategic, and I think the Democrats need to understand this. It is not an old man being crazy, and it's not Donald Trump being stupid. He is applying basic principles of marketing to continue to differentiate from his competition. And that, I think, not only explains his zaniness, but creates an opportunity for the Democrats to forge a strategy to thwart it. And it is not based on reason, it's based on emotion, which is part of the reasons the Dems frequently fail, right? Everything from cancel culture to, the progressive side of the party. There's a feeling about what we should do that's right, what's good for this country. And that's not necessarily the same as winning votes and appealing to people in an emotional way where they're going to vote for you.
I'm all for the Democrats not being complacent. I'm all for this idea that I'm talking to you about it right now, but this idea that we shouldn't trust the polls. I am happy. I'm happy for Democrats to completely believe that these polls. Oh no! But remember what happened. I like the sort of the PTSD thing that's happening. I mean, okay, that's a bad statement to make, but yeah, I do like it that they are so traumatized by 2016 that every time a hint of optimism rises up within them, like, no, I gotta push this down. Because it happened before in 2016. It's gonna happen again. I can't. Because they just don't want to be hurt again. They don't want to be. They've got their guard up. It's like, when you go through a bad breakup and you get in the next relationship and she's like, oh, I'm not the other person. Why are you, keeping like, no, I got to keep my guard up. And then she leaves you too. And then it gets reinforced, that kind of.
Yeah.
It is. But I do think, right, that I think you're, I understand that you think, will Trump win? Can Trump win? Is a completely, those are two different questions. And I hope that you don't think, and I understand that, what he's doing in terms of his strategy and why it's working within his base and how there's a certain part of his base that's never going to leave him. But I hope that because that feels very cynical to me in terms of the larger American public. Like, it feels cynical to me, and it just isn't something that has necessarily played out in other elections. It worked for this guy. There's a cult of personality around him. It's worked for this particular election in 2016. And 2016 was a very sort of unique, very crazy time where there were a lot of, I guess, illusions that, okay, again, we had the first black president for 8 years. Everything has changed. Well, no, everything hasn't changed. We have just taken the first step towards a transformation, and it's still fragile. And there is going to be a backlash, because every time something major like this happens, there is a backlash. And all these people who are kind of hiding underground, they do come up and they try to push back. So progress happens 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So, and I want to ask you this. So in 2016, you had a much more optimistic and a sort of a positive perception of your fellow Americans, right? Where you never thought this would happen. And that was based in,
it was based on emotion, which is why I'm stepping back here. And I also succumbed to my own implicit biases about what I thought this great country could or should do. Like you, I was like, that's cynical to think that this guy can actually win. Yeah. My people are better than that. And learning is something that we like to do in life, right? We get punched in the face, and then we're like, all right, I got a new strategy here. I'm learning. And what I learned is to go back to what I'm good at professionally. And that's why I'm looking at this through this lens of cutting out all emotion and saying, from the point of view of brand and messaging, okay, back in 2016, you had I'm with her. What was that? And Hillary herself admits, even in her book, that she had an awful time just trying to let people know what her simple story was. She's a great administrator, right? She could have been a great leader, but she was horrible at marketing. And you had the Donald, who was a champion at it, right? Make America great again, keep the Mexicans out, keep the Muslims out, right? Pull from NATO, destroy, get us out of the trade agreements, tariff China, right? It was all a coherent solution to problems that his base really fervently believed in. And I'm saying the same damn thing now, which is I thought none of that would supersede. I knew Trump's messaging was better. We used to argue about this in a bar in Toronto, and you were the one talking about positioning and differentiation and brand messaging. And me, the brand strategist, was like, yeah, that's all true, but we're better than that. And guess not. We aren't better than that. My cautionary tale is that marketing, positioning, messaging, these work. And right now, okay, the reason the polls are the way they are is because Biden's in a bunker, and it's not Coke Pepsi. There's only Coke. And he's whacked out of his mind, but he's staying true to his message.
It's the other Coke. It's the other Coke.
Exactly. Yeah. So in summary, just to summarize though, is you remove the veneer of emotion, you remove who America is or could or should be, and you look at it strictly from the mechanism of a political campaign, and Trump, by amping up all of the Trump characteristics, right? Even his irrational meanderings, right, are very colloquial and guy in the bar next to you kind of drunk bullshitting, right? It's all done with intent. And when you're on the outside looking in, this guy's on self-destruct. But when you look at it from a messaging point of view, he's bang on brand. And so far, and this is the message to the Democrats. Let's not talk about the polls. Let's not talk about what if, could be, what should be. Let's talk about what they got going on right now. And right now you got Biden in a bunker and you got Trump frothing at the mouth in a Trump kind of way. Mm-hmm. And this is a real problem, because as we get closer and closer to November, Trump's messaging is crystal clear and on point. Everyone knows exactly where this guy's at, despite your aunt and grandfather dying in an ICU. Okay, and we'll talk about that in a second as a potential problem. But Biden has yet to define himself clearly. Okay. He's got to go beyond being a typewriter, as Bill Maher characterized him, right? He's got to put on his big boy messaging pants and create a persona and energize the base in a way that transcends simply a non-Trump vote. Okay, that's my point of view. So I'm agreeing with you completely. We can talk about polls, but strictly from my filter of what is the brand like and what are they doing to ladder up to a decisive and earth-shatteringly important election, Trump is bang on pitch perfect, which goes against a lot of what people are saying. But I just think the guy's rocking it, even though we all might die. No. And Biden is in a bunker. I don't know what the hell this guy is thinking. I guess it's Obama 2.0. I mean, that's kind of it. Okay, it's a white Obama who's kind of old and he's a little bit friendlier, right? Yeah, there's nothing going on.
So I disagree with you a little bit about the characterization of the whole 2016 thing. So in 2016, you said that you were consumed with emotion. That
absolutely,
but was it really just emotion? I mean, you had been we were again coming off 8 years where your fellow Americans, right, had made electoral decisions that you just had none of us really expected in our lifetimes. Honestly, I didn't, right? And we had seen that they had elected this man, Obama, and it's not just, I mean, largely it has to do with the fact that he was black, but also there are a lot of things he did. Like, when we're talking about universal health care, of course, there was a lot of problems, but there was a sense of optimism among Americans about their fellow Americans. They felt very good about themselves, right? And I don't think that that's just based in emotion. I mean, there were tangible results that you saw. Now, to your point, Obama was also a great storyteller. And this is I guess, the next thing I want to ask you about is that when you're talking about strategy, branding, staying on brand, and the marketing perspective, you need a position, but you also need a story. Like, people don't just want to look at what they're buying, but they want to know why they're buying it. They're actually paying for the why. They're voting for the why.
100%. Right. 100%.
Okay, so Obama had that. He had that story. He had hope and change. He had, the entire. Well, I mean, everybody knows what Obama's story was. Then, Trump had that story, Make America Great Again. Even, lock her up, build the wall. Like, all of those were different chapters in his story. Hillary Clinton did not have a story. Hillary Clinton was probably the most qualified person to run for president.
I really agree. No, despite everything, Hillary in the White House, we would have been on point for 60 years of post-World War II American history. The train would have just kept on the tracks, right?
Yeah, but she didn't have a story. She had a lot of policy points. She had a lot of bullet points. So
she was a woman.
Yeah, she was a woman. That has, and no matter what people say, that has a lot to do with it. Then there's now you have Joe Biden, okay? And there is a very and this is the question I have to ask you, that is it a compelling story? Biden won the primary by not being Bernie, right? Biden won, if he wins this election, he's going to win it largely for not being Trump.
Oh, we're 100% in on that. That's why we were joking. Stay in the bunker, buddy. Don't do anything.
Don't do anything. Right? So you're saying that's a bad thing, but I agree with you. I've heard a lot of people say, the more Trump talks and the less Biden talks, the better it is, right? But Biden, if you know, like I've been a big fan of Joe Biden. I mean, he used to come to Pakistan to moderate, to oversee the elections and everything. I mean, people love the guy when they meet him. Like, they absolutely love him. If you see, I think there was the CNN town halls he does. Like, you would not think that this guy was in cognitive decline. You would think that he is one of the wisest and most experienced and empathetic people you know. I mean, there was a guy who talked to him who lost his wife or something in this one of these attacks, these racial attacks at a church, right? And Biden responded by talking about his son and how he lost his wife and his kid. When he was just a young guy in a car accident, but he talked about it with so much introspection and so much empathy. And if he comes out, that if you think about loss, Biden's very good at relating to people who've gone through loss. Right now, we're going through this pandemic. People are going through loss. They're losing their jobs. There's probably going to be a housing crisis, right? Because of the whole rent thing, people not being able to pay.
It's cataclysmic. It's absolutely it's historically cataclysmic. Yeah.
It is an opportunity for him to be way more than just the not Trump guy.
Of course.
He can build on that. My understanding from, the way that some of his campaign people are speaking, and, weirdly actually kind of know people who know people on this campaign. It's a little strange right now, is that right now at this point, they're trying to lay low and let Trump do whatever damage he can. And because 3 months is an eternity in American politics, and because really all that matters ultimately is what happens in the last 1 or 2 months.
Yeah. It's like a basketball game. You watch a basketball game and, the last 2 minutes, they've been sweating it out for 2 hours and it doesn't matter.
That's a story that's going to be, and I've seen this. Now, another thing that's happening now is the Lincoln Project. Okay, the Lincoln Project, Bulwark, Republicans Against Trump. And these guys are, and I want to ask you about this as a strategist too. They're coming up with these ads that the Democrats.
Oh yeah, they're hugely entertaining. Yeah.
They have never done, but I look at that and they resonate with me. And I think, I'm like, why aren't the Democrats doing this? Like, the Democrats come from this place of everything is so cerebral and professorial. There's policy here on trade and tariffs in China.
Yeah, who gives a shit?
I gotta tell you one more story about this. Is when I was living in Buffalo, when I was doing residency, and I think I may have told you about this. I had a cleaning lady who used to come and clean the apartment like once every month or 2 weeks or whatever. My mother at the time my mom's a professor who's retired and now does all kinds of other stuff. So she was in Pakistan trying to work up a schooling initiative in rural areas, and she was facing some resistance from the Taliban, who wanted to influence the schooling and make it religious, and she was trying to make it more sort of math, science, secular, and everything. So I was on the phone with my mom. I was talking to her while this lady was cleaning, right? Just a blonde, white, regular, working class woman in Buffalo. And she heard me say Taliban a lot. And then she came and asked me about the conversation. She's like, I couldn't help hearing what you were talking to your mom about. And so she's in Pakistan doing, and I told her about some of the work that she's doing and how the Taliban is trying to stop it. And, so we got into this. I said Taliban a bunch of times. And then she just paused for a second. Right? And this is 2008, about 3 months before the election. She was registered to vote in the 2008 election. She goes, so the Taliban, those are the bad guys, right? That's what happened. It was like 3 months before the election. So I explained to her who the Taliban were. I mean, they didn't even know. There are people who show up 1 month or 2 months before, right? And a lot of times they are not in tune with this stuff. They're not following it. They're not political junkies like you or me.
Yeah, it's the opposite of the Twitterverse, right? It's just
It's the
people
opposite of fun.
leading their lives. And then that again points to my harping on messaging. It's like,
Yes.
what is getting through? What is
But
that
those are the
decision?
people who helped Joe Biden beat Bernie. And Bernie, for all of his crowds and all of his rallies and these huge audiences, like he couldn't get those numbers out to vote. He could get them to tweet, right?
Yeah, how many people are tweeting compared to how many people are voting? And then we go back to polling, Ali. We're going back to polling again.
Yeah.
Which is like everyone was talking about that Joe was done. Joe was toast. He had no money and he was finished. It was going to be Bernie or Elizabeth. Even Buttigieg was considered as a contender.
Well,
and within 2 weeks, Joe was it. That was it. You could set all that polling on fire. Right? Who shows up? Who actually makes the decision? What kind of behavioral change are you going to engender? Right? I agree with you. Let's talk about Dem strategy. But before I talk about Dem strategy, let me share with you a meme I saw floating around, which I think just nails it more than anything else and gets to the heart of this issue strategically.
Right.
Is Trump supporters don't want their fearless leader, okay, to support them and help them feel empathetic toward them, govern in their best interest, or really do anything except for, I mean, those things are good. We'll take them. But what's most important to people who embrace a personality and even a style of governance like Donald J. Trump is that he hates and fights against the same people we hate and we fight against. So it is the kind of leadership which is once again based upon divisiveness, conflict, separation, anxiety, and stress relief. So Biden, to your point, could and should, and he's already done it, be the anti-Trump in that sense, where it's less about fighting our enemies. We're in a time of crisis and we need to bring the nation together. It's about unity. It's about organization. It's about rule of law in the sense of functional governance. And we need to recapture, we need to, in a sense, rekindle what's been lost in this fervor of America First insanity. Get a populist charlatan out of the White House who's dismantled this functional and actually wonderful edifice that's been operating pretty well, right, for a while.
Yeah.
And we need to stop this political anarchism, right? It's a sense of normalcy. So to your point about Bernie was reactionary in the same sense Trump was, only diametrically opposite. He wanted to tear down the House too, which was his popularity in 2016. As we joked, remember, Trump should have picked Bernie as a VP candidate, and then it would have been the Nationalist Socialist Party, right?
Well, yeah, so I want to
bring in the opposite ends, right? So Biden comes out as the anti-Trump. We can't even handle the daily news flow. Right? At the end of World War II, Americans were polled and asked that they couldn't even look at the news anymore, even though it was on a piece of paper in the morning. There was just so much going on, right? Politics is like the background music in a movie, okay? You see a movie and you can't really say what songs were there, or you don't even notice it. It's part of the holistic experience of being entertained and watching a film. Politics should technically be like that in a just, fair, and effective society. A society cannot sustain itself and be functional when every 5 seconds you got news alerts with the latest catastrophe, calamity, or crisis inundating your limited bandwidth, okay? Right. And I think people are like, we just can't handle this anymore. I mean, they'll take the guy in the bunker who's at least a little bit empathetic to me, cares, and might actually have a solution so my grandma doesn't die. We're in it to win it. And I think you're absolutely right. I think Joe Biden needs to go emotional. He needs to go with this unity. It's a kind of make America great again motif where we forget about make America great again. We like kind of delete the last 4 years and we go back to the trajectory that we were on before, which was a healthier, more holistic America on the right path that actually showed world leadership and, had significant influence. I think you're right.
And I think that if he had a story, if Biden came out with just a simple story about science and empathy, you have to embrace science and embrace empathy and be empathetic towards people. And if that was his thing, I mean, those are, because the science that would, especially with everything that's going on with the pandemic, right? I think that would really nail that. But I'm hopeful, fingers crossed, that this time he does come up with a story, because I know John Kerry didn't. John Kerry was like
John Kerry was also a disaster.
Oh God, he was just rambling.
And this was against Bush. Bush was enthralled in the Iraq War. The economic crisis was at its head. It was inconceivable that George Bush would get a second term. Are you crazy? And and this is the point we're making, it all boiled down to personality and brand. Right? On paper, sure, John Kerry. Okay, let's forget the Swift boat stuff and all that bullshit, right? It's like he seems reasonable, but he talks senatorese, right? He's got that high kind of, New England shit. It's like no one could relate to that.
Well, and before the war, before I was against it.
And then Bush is sitting there like, he's the guy you're having a beer with, and he's like, but this reinforces my cautionary tale to the Democrats, which is it really boils down to personality. Now, Biden is much more likable than Kerry was. That's hands down correct. But at the same time, there's really no energy. So going back to the Karl Rove reality of energizing your base, Biden's vice president pick, and this is, of course, a no-brainer, will be absolutely pivotal to his capacity to win. So this is a make or break moment. McCain chose Sarah Palin, which is very interesting. So, and it was kind of a Bannon lurking strategy too. There was a recognition that the Tea Party was in ascendance. And this proved to be categorically correct with the winning of Trump, right? And now everyone thought, especially the liberals on the left, that Sarah Palin was a maniac and brought McCain down, right? But that might not have been the case necessarily in retrospect. What might have brought McCain down was McCain's own centrism, right? And that was the point that Bannon understood too. So Bannon loved Sarah Palin, and Bannon loved Trump for exactly the same reason. And if you think about it, they're male-female versions of the exact same brand and sensibility.
Yeah, I think so. That's really interesting. I mean, think when you had, when Sarah Palin, when he chose Sarah Palin, that may have given his campaign a boost. Right?
Exactly. We thought that was like batshit crazy, but in his historical retrospect, it was a harbinger.
It was a harbinger, but it gave him a boost with his base. So here's where I this is where I think that the base really matters, right? Trump just tweeted. He's like, "Oh, I've got 96% support among his base." Like, well, congratulations, that's great.
Of course,
like Saddam Hussein.
It's going to get more and more outrageous, bro. This is grab your popcorn, because this is only just begun. Historians 1,000 years from now are going to wrestle in the hallways trying to cover Trump. Right? They're going, no, I got this guy. No, I want to, get into this. Right? It's unbelievable.
But here are two realities about having a very loyal and very passionate base, like a street team that is going to turn out for you. Right? Right. Number one is, if your base is massive, if they're huge, then you're going to continue winning no matter what you do. Shoot people on 6th Avenue or like kill 140,000
screw up a pandemic, kill 100,000 people.
If it's big, right? But the second thing is that if your base is small but very, very loud, right, then you can still win if nobody else shows up. Okay, if the people who are not in your base, if they just don't show up, if they look at you and they're like, "Oh, these guys are crazy," I'm just not going to show up. I think that's what happened in 2016. And I think the day after Trump was elected, there was such a shock. It was like a 9/11 type moment. It was really like just emotionally.
Oh yeah, we were it's unreal.
For Republicans like Mitt Romney, for Republicans like the people like George Conway, Kellyanne Conway's husband. It was a sort of a traumatic 9/11 kind of moment, because it's I'll tell you, I just had this conversation. We were talking about this last night. Is that I'm going to say, well, you are so anti-Trump, right? Why aren't you he's talking about Kim Jong-un. Why aren't you talking about all these other dictators in the world and all these other leaders that are doing terrible things like MBS? Like, because I'm on this side, because this is supposed to be where this is a democratic society. This is an enlightened society. This is a multicultural, diverse, nation of immigrants. It's something that I identify with. This is where I belong. And I'm, in Canada also, nation of immigrants and everything. And we've had our Trump-like characters here as well. And when that happens, that affects me a lot more, right, than, what Kim Jong-un is doing. I mean, yeah, in terms of body count, what he's doing is, a lot more consequential. But when it happens here, if you have somebody who commits a crime, a terrible thing, you're going to be upset. If there's criminals who commit crimes, that's a bad thing. But if you have a federal judge who's committing crimes or engaged in corruption, it's a much more serious issue, right? Because there is a certain standard that they're held to, and that is almost, it's like a beacon. And what you're saying about American exceptionalism, right? There is a beacon. There's this idea of free speech, of a nation of immigrants, of diversity, of inclusion, of equality, individual liberties, and all of these things. So it's particularly an assault on that. And I think that's what triggered a lot of liberals out of their complacency. And it's a big difference. Now, his base is small. They're loud. They're all on Twitter. It's a big thing, but they're small. Right.
Well, again, it's statistics. What do you mean by small? You're dealing with 63 million people voted for him?
63 million people who voted for him, but not all of that was his base. We're talking about the base that consistently comes out for him. Right.
Yeah, I know, but I just care about who pulls the trigger in November. And this goes back to woulda, coulda, shoulda, modeling, polls, what we think. And again, what we can do right now is focus on how these candidates are positioning themselves for that critical binary decision point in November. Mm-hmm. So I agree with you categorically in everything that you're saying, but there's a counterpoint to each. When you say that American exceptionalism is based on humanism, on power, on leadership, right? Mm-hmm. Taking the burdens of the world, right? Being the world's cop, right? Organizing treaties, picking up after World War II, engaging in conflict, engaging in war for ostensibly the sake of peace, unity, and a better world. There's another camp of exceptionalism, which is in diametric opposition to that. Globalization has ruined our jobs. Everyone from NATO and our allies to the Chinese are eating our lunch. Unfair trade agreements have decimated our capacity to maintain our leadership position. So we need a candidate who is America first. We need someone to pull out of these disastrous treaties that haven't really been in our benefit. We need to stop engaging in pointless wars, killing our people and costing us trillions in our coin. And we need to redefine who we are as a people, right? Mm-hmm. And get to the heart of what we're about. And largely, this is based not on hope, but it's based on fear. We do not like transformation. We do not like disruption. We have a sentimental, nostalgic look back to the Eisenhower years where everyone was white and male in terms of power and middle class. And we were the leader of the free world. Yeah. And there's no reason we can't get back there. My life will be so much better. So to your point, how many people react to that? I was talking just yesterday to someone who voted for Donald Trump, mm-hmm. and she felt strongly that this guy was going to usher in a reformation of some of the mistakes that had been made. And she's middle class, she's reasonable and rational, and she loves her kids, and she voted for the Donald. And it took her about 2 months to scratch her chin and say, oh my God, what did I do? But get this, despite 4 years of the Donald frothing at the mouth, and despite kids in cages, okay, despite everything that characterizes this amazing presidency, and I say amazing, right, in almost a literary kind of construct, she is still indecisive. Despite all that, 2 months in, and she's still like, I don't know about this Biden guy, and a liberal kind of takeover, and again, she's a reasonable person, You know, I was chatting with her as a friend,
Is
but I think
she a Democrat?
she embodies a lot of this bedroom community swing state sensibility, which is despite 4 years of absolute batshit crazy insanity. I don't know. This could be better than.
There's a it's also the numbers, right? You know how they say that, you know, if you ask for donations for a hospital with 200 kids with leukemia, then nobody really donates. But if you show a picture of one kid with leukemia, then everybody's going to donate. It's like that with numbers as well. It's kind of like the scandals that Trump has when there's 10 or 12 things happening every day, right? And each tweet is a scandal, and it's very deliberately a scandal to actually distract from the actual real story.
That's the strategy. That's the strategy.
It is a strategy. When you've got so much to go after, you're going to end up a lot of things and going to end up getting buried, right? Whereas, if you have one big scandal like Hillary's emails, and looking back on it, right, Hillary's emails, then that is going to absolutely dominate. It'll take over everything. One advantage that I think that Biden has is that he's also had like a whole bunch of things. Everybody knows about them. And then combined with the fact that the people who have decided that they want to vote against Trump will vote for a toddler's soiled diaper.
Oh, absolutely. Okay? They'll vote for you or me. So we still got a write-in chance like Kanye, right?
Yeah, I know. We do. And then there's and when I talk to people, I find there are two things that resonate with them the most. Like people who are undecided, like your friend. The first is that, okay, well, Biden and Trump, they're both bad. I'm like, yeah, but the difference is Trump doesn't listen to anybody. With Biden, at least if he's senile, if he's old, if he's got cognitive decline, or whatever you want to say, at least one thing that we know about him is that he is going to surround himself with people who are experts in their areas of expertise. He's going to surround himself with people who have different views. Yeah, that's one thing he definitely has a record of, and he's going to listen to them, whereas Trump won't do that. The second thing is the Supreme Court. Everything hinges on Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who was just released from the hospital yesterday again, survived cancer.
I know, it's close,
really,
bro. Yeah.
She's hanging on. It's really close. If something happens to her, right, and now you don't need the filibuster. You can't filibuster a Supreme Court pick. So anytime you just need 51 votes to get a Supreme Court justice on the bench, right? Now, if something happens to her before November, or actually even before December, even with a lame duck, I don't know what the rules are nowadays, but the whole lame duck government nominating Supreme Court justices, or confirming them rather. If something happens to her, you have a 6-2 SCOTUS majority, right? And a lot of things, you think of Roe v. Wade as history, the separation between church and state, that's pretty much history. A lot of things are going to be gone. So that's something that, when you talk to the Bernie bro folks who are really Bernie or bust, to which, when they come around, you tell them, well, when it comes down to it, it's a Supreme Court. And that is ultimately the thing that will make them go out and vote for Biden.
I hope so. But, just to push back on that, I have personal friends going all the way back to middle school who are progressive liberals, and they are frothing at the mouth on Facebook and Twitter and all their social channels with criticisms of Biden and disappointment that he's just the middle of the road, same old Democratic establishment turd. And I look at this with complete shock and awe. I respond to them, and I try not to go into it with them too much, which is put on your big boy and big girl pants and realize that the decision in November is binary. It's either Trump or, your boy Biden. And if Biden does not win, to your exact point, we're looking at the judiciary. We're looking at a generation or two of people who make the laws, right? So, but they're still in this childish camp of consternation and disappointment where anything short of an overt complete transformation and revolution of our society is unacceptable. right?
Mm.
And how big a chunk of Democrats are like that? I mean, I don't think it's that substantive, but it is significant enough that it comes up in blips in my world, and it could be inhibitive in terms of, you know, the momentum that the Democrats need in November to tip the scales where it counts. So this goes back to Biden's VP pick, you know, a person of color and female, angling more toward that progressive hope. Biden is older. He's vulnerable to the coronavirus. A lot can happen even if he wins. So his vice presidential candidate needs to be locked and loaded to be in the Oval Office, right?
So let's go into that really quickly. What would who do you think should be the ideal candidate? First of all, do you think it was a good thing for him to say that yes, it's definitely going to be a woman?
I think, just pragmatically speaking, I thought Amy Klobuchar was strategically the best pick. And the reason was that swing state 10,000, 20,000 vote that you were alluding to in terms of the micro percentage of,
that's why Hillary lost.
Winning a state. Yeah. I thought Amy embodied that. She was literally the mom, the soccer mom next door. She spoke with a heavy Midwestern accent. She was very, very accessible to this voting bloc, which made all the difference in 2016. She was accessible. She was matter of fact. She was pragmatic. Was she electrifying and exciting? No. But she was there to appease and assuage, and at the same time reinforce the notion that we're all in it together. The Dems aren't as scary as you think. You got a mainstream Obama guy in Biden, and then you have a chick, but it's a white chick, and she's the mom next door, and she kind of talks like this, how you doing? You know, we're going to make it happen. And I just thought she would be perfect for that segment, which is going to be decisive in November. Few people argue about that. Would she energize the minority base? Maybe, but a lot of the swing state vote is more contingent on that bedroom community white voter, right? I think. Yeah. So I thought Amy was good, but then Amy had the BLM conflict with her, with her work before she was out. And now it's kind of wide open, and there's a lot of variables. On the one extreme, you can say, what about Kamala? Even though she demolished Biden in one of the debates, she's charismatic, she's multicultural, she's just a whippersnapper. She's going to get the minority base excited.
She's great in those congressional hearings. I mean, she's fantastic.
Yeah, she's fantastic on camera. She's charismatic, but she's also triggering. She's triggering even to the progressive left, who look at her track record, you know, as an AG, is like, she's not the revolutionary liberal that we want. So she's controversial and complicated, but in terms of raw charisma, she's like a whippersnapper. And I thought that.
I think I
don't think it's going to happen, but you're saying Amy, okay. And if you can't get Amy, and if you want someone to throw a match on the kerosene, that would be Kamala.
Yeah, that's what I think. I think it's going to be Kamala Harris. And one of the reasons is, you know, you talked earlier about it. Well, it's not hope, it's fear. Those are the two things that I think, you know, even from marketing and strategy, I mean, everything that you're selling, because hope and fear are kind of the same thing.
Absolutely. They're flip sides of the same thing.
Yeah, they're connotationally different, but there is they are both anticipatory. They're an anticipation of something that you don't know about, that is unknown yet. And there has to be that aspect. I'm not seeing that with the Biden campaign yet. With Trump, there's a lot of fear. With Obama, there's a lot of hope. Clinton, there was a lot of hope.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
They use that. There's either one of these, each one of these campaigns have some element of that. And I hope that happens with the Biden campaign. But when it comes to the idea of hope and someone who embodies it, I think that Kamala Harris could do it. There is the Black demographic is a big factor. You know, people say that, well, the DNC orchestrated Biden's win and they got everybody else to drop out. Well, no, that's not the case. I mean, what happened was that Biden showed that he was the only guy who was getting loads and loads of people, you know, from the Black community coming out and voting for him, and everybody had a wake-up call. They're like, okay, these Bernie people, they're sort of privileged. They want to change the system. They want to destroy it. Right now, we're not in that position. We need to restore. We need to restore. We don't need to transform. And people who are in minorities for whom there's a lot at stake, a lot more at stake.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
some of these young sort of millennial whites may not understand as well, may not feel as closely. They came out and they just made the practical choice. Like, we got to vote for the old white guy.
Yeah.
Because they know. And I think that's why this is going to be an identity politics. Identity politics is going to play very heavily in this. It's just a fact. It always does to some extent.
Well, the Democrats are shackled with identity politics. It also offers them a lot of opportunities if they could filter it and get it right. It's just fragmentary and decisive, derisive.
It's not just the Democrats. I mean, the Republicans. Trump ran an identity politics campaign.
Yeah, but it's different for the right. That's like fuel for them. That's their good stuff. For the Democrats, it's inherently self-destructive and problematic if done wrong.
Except, and I read this on 538. There's a great article. I think it was Perry Bacon. Actually, I don't want to get the wrong author who wrote it, but it was about how identity politics, weirdly, we were talking about all the changes, the messages you're getting from Uber about BLM and everything. It seems like it's weird that identity politics is not backfiring on Biden and the liberals this year. It just isn't for some reason.
So far, because of the BLM stuff, this goes back to what we were talking about before. The zeitgeist is protest, rebellion, and with that, there's critical mass and excitement. But once the smoke clears, your asset and your benefit can turn into a crutch or a weakness, as it moves into November. You have to be very careful about things that are emotionally triggering because it can go both ways. Yeah. So I agree with you in principle, and it's good to be defining, but it's wide open, and it depends on resilience, but also good strategy for holding your ground and also expanding it. And also, as I keep harping over and over again, categorical differentiation. It can't just be the un-cola. So you got a Coke Pepsi situation to our analogy before. Biden is like 7-Up. He's the un-Trump.
Right? So let's do that really quick. And I know that we've been at this, so I don't want to take up too much time, but I really want to pick your brain about Biden and what he needs to do. So we've got the hope fear element. We're talking about having a story. We're talking about having a brand that is a differentiated brand. When Biden does rise out of his bunker, and when he does it at an opportune time. Right now, I think it's strategically good for him to lay low while all of this shit is happening all around. But again, there's a lot of time. 3 months is a lot of time. But when he does come out, and it's going to be with his VP choice, it's going to be during the convention. That's when
the virtual convention, like my kid's graduation.
Yeah. But see, what's happening is that you see Trump all the time because he's president. He's got to talk. You see Bernie talking about this because he's a senator. He's got to talk. Okay. You see all the other people, the governors, talking about it because they're governors. Biden is a former vice president. So even if he comes out and talks, nobody really cares because nobody's listening to him. It doesn't affect them at a local level in any way, right? So when he does, the only time he doesn't have a platform. The time when he has a platform to come out and talk is when he's going to have a VP candidate, and he is going to be the guy running against Trump, right? Which he really kind of, he is, but he's not, right? So, so when he does come out, what does he need to do? What is a story that he needs to come out with?
Sure.
What is his differentiating factor? What does he need?
Yeah, I mean, if Biden's campaign would give me a call, say, "Hey, Spitz, we saw you live streaming with Ali, and we like your baldness, we like your pandemic eyebrows. Yeah. Why don't you come over and talk to Joe? You have an hour with Joe Biden, and show us what you got." I would literally take the PowerPoint presentation that I pitched to Andrew Yang and give it to Biden, because it's the essential principles of marketing, which are no different for Yang than Biden. Of course, you'd have to tweak it in certain ways, the specificities of it. But I gave Yang 3 pieces of advice, none of which he liked, which explains why I was hired and fired probably in the same day.
But so is he. Where is he now? And
yeah, there you go. In retrospect, if I'd only listened to Spitz. He did listen to one ancillary observation that I made, that the electorate was furiously angry. So within a few weeks of my presentation to Yang, the only thing that really stuck or that he liked is that the electorate is angry. So he decided to be angry in his messaging, and he got on Stephen Dubner's Freakonomics, and he was F-bombing, and he was kind of ranting. And I almost felt that, he was channeling my assertion that the electorate was angry and needed intensity. Yeah, but the other stuff, he
but you got to stay on brand. You got to do it in your own way.
Yeah, you got to do it your own way. So Joe should do it his own way and not Yang's way. But I gave him 3 pieces of advice, which are essential. The first background was what we've been talking about for the last hour or so, which is that voters are like consumers. So they need a brand. They need simplified messaging. I got the opportunity to consult with Yang at a wonderful fundraiser that was held on the Upper West Side around August of 2018. It was an intimate group, maybe only 20, 30 people. He was up there, and it took him about 40 minutes to really get to his policy. And I asked several questions which were really about framing his messaging and getting to the heart of his value proposition and ultimate benefit to American voters from the point of view of differentiation from the Democratic playing field and ultimately Donald Trump. And Zach, his campaign manager, was kind of off in the corner. He was like, thank you. Andrew's a genius. I liked him a lot. I think, Asians are only 6% of the U.S. population, and it would just, having that diversity would be great. And he's charismatic. He's smooth. He's smart as hell. And I like UBI. I mean, people have been talking about that for 100 years. It was a revolution. It was a big deal. He had Medicare for all. He had kind of a humanity first model. Even in terms of policy, it's like the technologist candidate. He was exciting. But it took him forever to get it out, right? And in the world of sound bites, you can't be Noam Chomsky running for president, right?
Yeah. So
Zach overheard me, and we were talking, and Andrew knew, a wonderful woman who, he worked with on video, and he hooked us up, and that precipitated the meeting. I went to his Midtown office. I was 10 minutes late. This is a funny story, too. And he made me sit down and watch him sign his book, War on Normal People, for the 10 minutes that I kept him waiting.
Like deliberately, he told you that's why he's doing it? Or
No, but he was late. He kind of was like, so him and Zach sat down at a little table in his campaign office. I apologized. I was on the train, New York. And all of a sudden, he just got a stack of books. And I'm sitting there. I got the PowerPoint ready. And he's kind of like, all right, he's just signing away. And it was almost exactly the amount of time I kept him waiting. Right. So he's like, all right, guy, you kept me waiting. My time's precious. Presidential candidate Andrew Yang. You're going to sit here and watch me sign these books. So I thought that was kind of funny. But once we got rolling, I gave the context of voters as consumers, and then I nailed down 3 things. And the first is like, go mano a mano with Trump. As you probably remember, Yang tried to do the dance between, sympathetic Trump voters who were disillusioned with Obama, and he felt that his technologist position, UBI, and very socialized approach would appeal to the disenfranchised swing state voter. He didn't want to upset Trump. So he hated that idea. And if you see his messaging, he never criticized Trump. And my point of view is from a brand, right? You're an outsider coming in, hit that leader. Hit it. And this would have done 2 things. It would have differentiated Andrew in terms of his messaging and positioning. And it also would have gotten him attention. Like, who is this Yang guy, right? So I thought that if he went on blistering attacks against Trump through the lens of everything that embodied his sensibility and his point of view, all of a sudden he would have flared on the national scene. And I told him...
He didn't really define his opponent. That's one of the things that you hear about.
That's exactly it.
Define your opponent. But
define your opponent and hit that guy. Go in. Gloves off. I even had this GIF of Rock'em Sock'em Robots in my PowerPoint presentation, which is like, you know, you got to go in there. Don't worry about the swing voters. Don't worry about disillusioning, you know, voters who were disillusioned and went to Trump. Hit that guy. Hit him direct, you know. And
what about the primaries though? Because I mean, the thing is, when you're talking about defining your opponent, crap. Oh, are you still there?
Yeah. Can you see me?
Yeah, something happened. I don't know where.
Okay, I was yelling too loud.
Yeah, I can. I think.
Are we still going?
No, you weren't. It was it's my computer. It's like restarting something. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
all right. Anyway, you make a great point. It's like his immediate competition was the Democratic playing field, and Trump would be if he actually got the nomination, right? The low probability. I told him, don't worry about the other guys. Don't worry about Biden. Don't worry about Elizabeth. You're going to be standing next to them, and they're going to see this Asian guy up there, and you've got about 20 seconds to blow everyone's mind, right? Can't go into too much detail about your stuff, but they see you as strong and in opposition. And, you know, again, he didn't really like that tack. The other two were related to this.
Why didn't he like it? Why didn't he like it?
Because I think, I don't want to speak for him, but I think he really felt that he could win over, ultimately, if he would get the nomination, the Trump swingers and the people who are kind of moderate and in the middle. And he felt that many of the reasons that people did vote for Trump, like my friend who I was talking to yesterday, felt disenfranchised and disadvantaged by the Obama years. They were rational, reasonable players. They didn't embrace all the rhetoric, but they felt that this Make America Great Again motif and this embodiment of disruption and change were valid considerations. That's the essence of Andrew's position, right? Which is automation is taking jobs, right? The destruction of the middle class, the role that data and technology and governance can play in terms of infusing benefit of everyone's life was central. So he felt if he's true to his values, it's not so much against this notion of transformative change. It's more about letting them into the fold. And if he insulted their guy, it would feel like a deplorables moment. That's what I sense. And he reinforced this. He commented on Michael Bloomberg. Michael Bloomberg did exactly this, what I'm advocating. And I think he did it well. And I remember Andrew, for a brief period, was a commentator on one of the new, I think he was on CNN as an official. Yeah. And one of the first things he said was that Michael Bloomberg blew it because he went so anti-Trump. So I think this was central to his sensibility. And I never understood. I go, Andrew, the best thing that could possibly happen to you is if Donald Trump tweets to his 60 million followers, who is this Andrew Yin Yang guy? And what is this with $1,000 a month? Give me some. I thought that'd be great. All of a sudden, everyone's talking about Andrew, right?
Is there such a thing as it? You know, good. They say bad. Any publicity is good publicity. Is that true? Is there a limit to that? Because I know
Ali, when you're a nobody, I mean, and I don't mean to be derogatory. Andrew's done amazing things, and given his success, even in Iowa, he was a great candidate. He did a great job, but you got to get in front of people's minds. It's like when Madonna kissed a girl at the MTV Music Awards, and everyone was like, "Oh my God, you know, Madonna kissed a chick." Well, Madonna kissed a chick because she was up there with Aerosmith and, you know, a million other bands, and she wanted to be on the front page of Variety that morning, right? Just get attention. If people don't know who you are, everything else is a moot point. And I think going up against Trump that way would have infused Andrew in terms of the national sensibility and would have given him a jump start in terms of beginning that. That's all I'm saying, and it would have characterized what I think. And Biden, similarly, he's hanging out his bunker. He needs to go mano a mano with Trump, only his angle would be, you know, a little bit different. I think Biden needs to use the pandemic and the day-to-day suffering of all of America as the lens through which he builds empathy.
Yes.
And he derides Trump as a hustler, a buffoon, a con artist, and someone it's self-evident that this guy is unfit for the presidency because of pandemic response, the deterioration of the economy, which is a direct result of the public health crisis, his lack of empathy, his style of leadership. I mean, the list goes on, but you don't want a deplorables moment. You don't want to insult his potential swing, voters like the woman I was talking to yesterday. But you want to bring hope, like you say, be the counterpoint to fear. Bring hope, and then label the fearmonger as a clown. Mm-hmm. And then I think he'll have a good foundation to work from.
Okay, so the debates happen. Like, supposing the debates happen, there's Thomas Friedman had an article. He said that Trump really needs to debate Biden. He needs it because his rallies, nobody's showing up. The coronavirus is basically his main thing is getting loads of big crowds, like, oh, winning all the time. And he has to show that visually, and he can't do it. Like, just visually, it's not coming across. So he needs the debates. To show what he's up to. Like, Biden needs the opposite. Biden needs to stay low and just go out.
Right.
He's like, the negotiating power here is with Biden. So Biden should just make the case that yes, I will absolutely do the debates if I have for two conditions. Here's all my tax returns for the last 20 years. Trump, show yours, and let's go debate. That's the first one. The second thing is we're going to have, at the end of the debate, we're going to have a 10-minute fact-checking thing that is also going to be televised with it, where people are going to talk about where an independent approved by both parties and all that. Trump would obviously not agree to either of those. And then Biden could say, he didn't want to debate. That was Thomas Friedman's position. But suppose if debates happen, which they probably will, and I don't think that Biden's going to take Friedman's advice. I don't know, just a gut instinct.
I like the idea. Tom's a brilliant guy.
One of him and Jeffrey Goldberg, Fareed Zakaria, and these are some of my favorite writers.
Mine too. It's no accident that we're on the show together. I admire all those. They're
fantastic.
They're brilliant people. Especially Fareed. I just want to call out Fareed is logical, consistent. That guy's great. He
understands it. Yeah. So what happens in the debates? Supposing debates happen, it's Biden and Trump. Now,
wow.
Yeah, I gotta say one thing, and I know that I don't know how much cognitive decline there has been in the last 8 years, or whatever they say about it. I think it's overblown. I do think that there's his gaffes are
He's always had gaffes. He's the gaffe guy.
But people don't. There's when you actually look at it and you talk to political analysts and they just brush it off. They're like, you know what? People who have been verbally articulate, that for some reason politicos and media people really care about them. The public and the voters don't. Like with Trump, with all the shit that he used to say, nobody cared.
They love it. They like him more because of it.
More because
the more irrational he is, the more they like him.
Right. Bush, it was the same thing. Dan was the same thing. So like every time there are these verbal slip-ups. Anyway, so he does this. I saw the debates that he did with Sarah Palin in 2008. He had a vice presidential debate where at one point she talked about, I'm a woman and I got to take care of kids. And then he actually choked up a little bit and he talked about, he's like, just because I'm a man, don't think I don't know what it's like to be a single father to my 2 kids after my wife and my daughter died in a car accident. And I had to raise them on my own while I was going to the Senate. And he did that, and it was amazing, and it killed. That's the one thing that people remember from that debate.
Empathy for Joe, Uncle Joe.
Yeah.
Hi, Uncle Joe. How you feel? I'm feeling okay. How are you? How you doing?
Yeah. 2012 with Paul Ryan, right? The guy had a completely different approach. And in this case, he was everything Paul Ryan was saying, because Paul Ryan's like young and passionate. He's like, this is what he was very serious. And Biden was just like, oh, malarkey. And he was, he was almost sort of dismissing him like he's the older guy.
The elder statesman. Why would you even take this guy seriously?
Yeah, you're the kid and whatever. And it was very effective. So it seems like, and in the debates, I mean, aside from the earlier primary debates, his last few debates, like the South Carolina one, a couple when he really started getting serious, he has been really good. What happens when he goes up against Trump? It's a risk for sure.
It's a huge risk. Let's look at the debates with Trump and Hillary. And I was one of the few libtards on the side who was Hillary's getting her ass kicked. And then I would read the New York Times analytics coming out the following day and goes, unbelievable. Hillary had point for point. She was wiping the Donald out. And I was like, did we watch the same debate? Right? So if you see a transcript, to your point about Kennedy and Nixon, right? If you see a transcript of what was said and how it was said, Hillary, hands down, she's, rational, had good arguments, set it up well, responded well. But emotionally, in terms of body language, there was one point too where Trump literally was wandering around like McCain on stage.
Like looming over her.
Moving over her. And then he took a chair at one point, and he was like literally almost humping the chair. I don't know if you remember that. I mean, it was unbelievable. But what I recognized at the time, right, even thinking that Hillary just had this in the bag, was that Trump did a masterful job of tapping into the anger of the disenfranchised swing state voter that he was going for. Hillary was counseled in the exact opposite direction. Like, you're female, you're kind of shrill, right? You need to come across as like friendly and nice and non-confrontational. People kind of know you as a bitch. You don't want to be a bitch. You're going to freak people out. That's your biggest Achilles heel. Hillary, you have to come across as almost the matronly librarian, right? Or the maitre d' at a restaurant taking you to your table. And if you remember the debate, she stood there like, and then don't get triggered by Trump. They advised her, just chill out. He's going to hurl all this stuff, emails, all that. And she did that. She listened to her strategic counsel. And the whole debate, she was just kind of like, they even did that meme of that one guy, kind of dancing like this as kind of counterpoint to that. But what was the fail about that performance, and even I recognized it thinking that she would win, was that she wasn't making an emotional connection to the audience that she had to win over. She came off as kind of frivolous and non-caring, and this raging, frothing at the mouth maniac humping at a chair embodied exactly the sensibility that the country was facing, right? Economic crisis, destruction of the middle class, our factories are closing, unemployment is high. We had this black guy in the White House for 8 years. Look at me. I'm not better. I'm worse. I'm going to vote for the maniac who's humping the chair.
Now, in the eyes of the people who are watching this guy humping the chair, but over here, and like haters come at me, you're going to totally say that I'm in. But I think the sexism is a huge factor. Because
I totally agree. That's why I brought it up. That's why I said it's like a bitch, right?
Yeah, what you're saying is, like, if she is a bit of an asshole and she's like Trump, she is the bitch. And if she isn't, right, and she's becoming really the librarian thing that you're saying, then she's too weak. She's weak. She doesn't.
I get it.
Classic woman. How is she going to handle the affairs?
I'm just using her performance as counterpoint. I'm not blaming Hillary for following her
strategy.
I know in retrospect, she probably could have dialed up making an empathetic connection to the voters that she really, really needed to win. And she didn't do that. She didn't do that.
When she does do that, whenever she's tried to do it, she comes across as sort of a little disingenuous. She's not very good at it. It doesn't come naturally to her. I remember in New Hampshire when she won in 2008. When she lost the one before, I think right before New Hampshire, she cried. She almost started crying, and that worked out for her.
Of course. There's a human being behind that amicable or mean librarian, right? It's like
she does it too much. If she starts choking up like Joe Biden did against Sarah Palin, but she's also a woman, and she's upset. Oh, she's weak.
I get it, but I would share my deck with Hillary too, that I shared with Andrew, which is basically you got to call Trump out as a clown, as a buffoon, as a hustler. So she didn't do that very, very well. So just go through, his bankruptcies, his problems with women. The list goes long that he would be a potentially unfit president. Right. And she did that a little bit, but she danced around it. And she was too responsive to Trump's criticism.
I don't know. I don't know. Spitz, I think she did it. And I think a lot of other people have done it. But what I'm seeing from people like the Lincoln Project, and that's really having an impact, because that's Republicans speaking to the same audience.
I got it. Yeah.
They're doing it. And when they're talking, they're not saying stuff, failed businesses, the way he talks about women. I mean, all those things. We look at it as liberals and it resonates. So like, what an asshole.
Well, but Ali, let me interrupt for just a second. The Lincoln Project is based upon Trump's track record over the last 4 years. Trump was an outsider candidate who fell out of the sky. So the Lincoln Project is taking a similar tack, which is this guy's clearly unfit. He falls down a ramp, right? He's doing all these horrific things, even from a conservative Republican perspective, but it's based upon an actual track record as being in the Oval Office. Hillary didn't have that.
She didn't have that. You're right.
Right,
but
right.
And you're right. So but the way that they're framing it,
I agree. It's wonderful.
No, they're framing it in the sense that Trump has killed 135,000 people.
Yeah, he did.
Democrats are not going to say that. They say, like there's an ad out there I saw that said Trump murderer. Like that kind of the way what they swift boated, how they swift boated John Kerry, that kind of aggression that resonates with a lot of Republicans. But
I disagree with you here, and it's good that we're disagreeing because we've been agreeing too much, and our viewers are just kind of like, this is a circle jerk, right? I disagree with you. I think Biden needs to do some of that. He needs to literally call out Trump's malfeasance and the implications of that dereliction of duty explicitly and with detail. Okay. And he needs to do it in sound bites that are very, very convincing. But he needs to look Trump in the eye and say, there's literally 100,000. And by the debates, there's going to be 250,000 dead people. Okay. 250,000 Americans have died on your watch. And it's your fault. It's your fault.
But then we're not. When I was talking about the Lincoln Project, I was saying that that's a good thing that they're doing. This is something Democrats.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm sorry, we agree on this.
No, too. That's all. Okay, so we failed there. My second point to Andrew, which I would tell Biden, is that consumers, just like voters, you can't change their mind. Okay. What you can do is from an outside in point of view, you can understand how they think and feel about something. And then you could kind of guide them in the direction of your brand. Mm-hmm. So Biden has a tremendous legacy and he's tied at the hip with Obama. Right. And that's a big reason that he won the primaries, especially among the black vote, which is that he's tied. If you poll Democrats, Obama is a beloved figure. He's one of the most beloved statesmen of the Democratic Party. I think Biden, to the point I made to Yang, was he's got to hitch his wagon to a known commodity, and he needs to be a simple and intuitive and exciting extension of the sensibility of what people already think, know, love, and believe in. So he needs to do that in a way which gets rid of the bad, some of the baggage, but he needs to accentuate the reality of America in its best light under his auspices, right? Mm-hmm. When his party was in power. And he needs to accentuate how he's similar and even better than what came before, obviously in a way which doesn't self-destruct. It's dangerous, but what the Democrats did, which was unfathomable to me during the debates, they fought each other in a way that they were belittling Barack Obama, who is the most popular elder statesman of the party. That was cataclysmic for the party and also for the candidates, because who ended up winning, right? So you don't do that. So this is a recommendation of an inversion. Embrace the Obama and do it in a way that we were on the right path, and we're going to get it even better. We're going to delete this insanity and we're going to move it up to the next level. I think that is something voters could understand if put in a good light. This is trickier. And the last piece of advice I gave Andrew was so left field. The technology, data, sophistication, make America think again, right? Was his thing, the math hats. Yeah, which if I would have been his campaign person, I was like, no.
I like that. I thought that worked.
No. But anyway, so
why would you say no to that?
The math hats?
Yeah, I thought.
Who gives a shit about math? I mean, a lot of people hated math. They were like, this is what I failed in high school. I almost didn't graduate college because I couldn't do calculus. I get the fuck out of here with math hats. Seriously. Yeah. But anyway, the last one is the creation of a persona. So who the hell is this Andrew Yin Yang guy, and why should I vote for him? And I actually had a PowerPoint with Tony Stark, right? Which is the inventor, the entrepreneur, the genius. And then Andrew kept, he kept, identity politicking himself with the smart Asian. You need a smart Asian. I was like, downplay the Asian stuff or do whatever you want with it. I didn't think it was relevant or particularly effective. I mean, 6% of the population will like you. Yeah. But go with this motif of you're the Tony Stark of politics, just like Donald Trump was the firebomb, the napalm village destroying cataclysm, and his followers identified with it and loved it. What's Trump's brand? He's the destroyer of worlds. And who Andrew would be the Tony Stark who's going to reinvent America. I don't know, at least give it a whirl. And I would advise Biden to do the same. Who the hell are you, Joe? Right now, we know you, as Bill Maher mentioned, you're a typewriter for a lot of people, or you're the old guy and we're wondering if you're going senile yet, or you're Obama's VP. You've been around a lot. We recognize your name. In the Black community, there's a lot of resonance because of the halo effect of Barack. But who the hell are you, Joe?
Also, Biden is, even before Barack, I mean, one of the reasons that Barack Obama chose him is because in a lot of these Rust Belt states, and this is why the DNC is so gung-ho for Joe Biden, is that he has been to those churches. He knows people. Yes. He goes in, they hug him, they know him. He's known them for 40 years.
Such a winning persona. That is so awesome.
That's why he's got so much Black support, because he's been part of that community.
He has that to him. He's kind of he wears a plaid shirt and it's believable. You know what I mean? Joe Uncle, I think it should be Andrew. Trump is the destroyer of worlds, right? He's like the character from the Avengers, right? What do you call it? Thanos. Trump is Thanos. All right. Andrew Yang could or should have been Tony Stark, and Joe Biden needs to be Uncle Joe.
Yeah. And you know who?
Uncle Joe. That's it, man. He comes to visit with the pound cake. If you break your leg, he's there at the side of your bed making you feel better, right? Yeah. And he's reliable. He's a little bit, he says some weird fucking stuff, but he's good. He's good. He's Uncle Joe. I love this guy. I want him to help me.
Yeah,
help me, support me, feel for me, right? Give us a sense of stability, come to Thanksgiving dinner. And like, if there's a family fight, then everybody just chill out,
Yeah.
He needs a little bit of Yiddish in him.
I think of the Reagan, when Reagan was like, oh, there you go again. That whole debate went a little bit condescending. What are you talking about? I've been doing this for you. The way that he was with Paul Ryan in 2012 in that debate. All right. Two last questions before we go. We got like 9 minutes. Make America great again. Hope and change. What is the Biden bumper sticker? It's got to be more than. It has to be more than not Trump.
Right. Oh, absolutely. And that's what we're talking about. I don't know. The phrase just Joe to go. That sounds odd, but that just popped into my head, which is something that pithy and going forward, moving forward. So it's, Joe in the know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like something like catchy like that your uncle would say. So let's pretend your uncle is like, in a bridge tournament. Or your uncle is like playing old people pickleball. You know how seniors play pickleball? And if Joe's on a pickleball team, then what would be the phrase? You're on the sidelines rooting for Joe, and it's Uncle Joe on the pickleball. And then how would you characterize that and root for him? Joe in the know. Joe to go. Joe, I'm going for Joe.
I know, but Fritz, I gotta, here's the thing. And so, you do have a lot of young people you got to win over who are very disgruntled about the Bernie thing.
Yeah.
There's got to be something like when you think of Make America Great Again, right? It's not about Trump. It's not about a person.
I totally get it. Yeah.
It's a feeling. Hope and change is a feeling that can or may not be associated with Obama. I feel like there has to be a story that is independent of Joe Biden.
No, that's an excellent point. And the reason I think I intuitively gravitated toward a top line message that is about the candidate rather than the sensibility is is in that kind of anti-Trump kind of way, which is like, this guy is so toxic. We don't need policy. This is not about policy. This isn't about unity. It's not about, fixing things. It's about, we just need some guy who's just chill.
Yeah. We don't need a revolution. We need relief.
We need relief. We just, this guy's a maniac. People are dying. And, Joe's in the know. And maybe that's completely wrong, but I think a highfalutin phrase about revolution, it's not about revolution. It's just chilling the shit out,
Yeah, it doesn't have to be revolution, but, I think the Thomas Friedman session, like in a respect science, I think, what was it? Respect science, respect people, and respect, I don't know, something. Respect science, respect nature.
That comes across as preachy. You see that on the marquee of your church on Sunday. Respect, is a come to Jesus. I don't know. You need a call to action, but I just intuitively sense that even though Joe is as boring as a typewriter, I think a top line message should be kind of about him as a person, because he does have that empathy. You're not going to win this cognitively because there's a million, Trump he's been impeached, right? It's unbelievable the level of corruption overtly that this guy has engendered. It's not, they don't care. So we just need Uncle Joe to come in and make us feel better. You could argue points all day long and you can have a vision for America, but at the end of the day, we just want someone sane.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Last question to you is about this whole, you talked about the far left, the woke cult sort of that is really, really damaged. I mean, Noam Chomsky called Antifa a gift to the far right. Right?
Oh, it's a mess on the extreme. It is clearly a mess. Yeah.
And my contention is just that it's for mainstream liberals who are really tired of a lot of this sort of illiberal woke stuff. You really need to work hard to get Trump out, because that is a reaction to the whole Trump far right.
It's my friends from elementary school who hate Biden, and I go like, are you smoking crack? I mean, just chill out. It's him or the other guy.
Yeah.
What's so hard? What's so hard, liberals, libtards? What's so hard about that decision, right?
Yeah. My question to you is that I am sort of the opinion now that a lot of this sort of the wokish, the far left type thing, the Twitter mob type thing that was happening, that Noam Chomsky's come out against, Margaret Atwood's come out, all these people have come out and spoken out against, is something that is kind of dying out and getting old. I feel like it was a sort of a fad that was temporary. It was strengthened by opposition to Trump that gave it a lot of fuel. And I think now it's dying down. I have several reasons for this. One is if you look at the Biden victory, the way that he won, the way he completely trounced Bernie and everybody else in the primaries, even though everybody hated him online, social media, people hated Biden. People loved Bernie Sanders.
Oh, yeah.
Jeremy Corbyn, the absolute worst defeat. Right
since World War II. Yeah,
Jeremy Corbyn in the UK.
Yeah,
this Tara Reid accusation. Usually Al Franken, like there was a picture of him and he got canceled. He really had to resign from the Senate. Yeah. Tara Reid accusation comes up, and the same people were saying, "Oh no, you got to believe everybody, no matter what. Nobody ever lies." So like, okay, well maybe we do need due process. So there's a little bit of a correction happening there, even though Me Too is. Absolutely, we're both 100% supporters of Me Too, but with time, it actually is. I think it strengthens the Me Too movement by taking out some of the irrationality, the irrational fringes from it.
Yeah, that's rationally correct, but yes. We know that the reality isn't always the case.
Of course, that's right.
Yeah.
There's skepticism among the same people we're saying. They're saying, okay, no, it's not about you got to believe everybody no matter what. You have to take all accusations seriously. That's what it's about. And we did that with the Tara Reid accusation too. A lot of these things. Then you've got this new Harper's letter that came around that is being signed by a lot of people. And
Steven Pinker is being censured, right?
Yeah.
Steven Pinker from Harvard.
Yeah, he is.
Really? Are you kidding me?
I know. So most people they're not on board with this kind of thing. So what do you think about this? I think that, look, you have if you go with the extreme right and then the mainstream conservatives, right, and then you have the extreme left and then you have the mainstream liberals. The extreme right has a White House. The mainstream conservatives are pretty much kowtowing to the extreme right. They are just complete acolytes of Trump. So that whole thing is dead. The far left, the extreme left, is also a little nuts. But the only hope, I think, for the U.S. seems to be the mainstream liberals. It's the only people who still have, they still value due process. They still have, they're somewhat practical in the way they're doing things. They're not just talking to people about, well, what are your ideas? Tell me your ideas, because anybody can say great ideas. It's about how are you going to get those ideas through.
Yeah, it's having big boy and big girl pants, like we're saying, which is stop being 5 years old and pissing and shitting yourself, and just smell the coffee about the reality of what the country's facing and what realistically can be done right now. Absolutely. But, as you mentioned, there are fringes. And as we were talking about the Twitterverse is literally its own kind of engine of trending, right? What's trending on the Twitterverse, right? Mm-hmm. On the one hand, it's not as influential as people make it out to be, as was self-evident by Biden winning the primary and not Bernie. But on the other one, it's a harbinger of a sensibility and an aspiration of where the party would like to get to. Now, a specific example is Bernie Sanders, where he was beyond marginal. He was out in the Oort cloud of liberals, right? Medicare for all, right? Holding Wall Street accountable. The list goes on and on. After Bernie, ceded to Hillary, and we had all that kind of stuff, and then Trump won and ascended, Bernie's radical positions, even for 2016, have evolved into the mainstream Democratic camp to a greater or lesser extent. So I think the principles of the woke left, the principles of them, equality, based on, any factor, gender, sexuality, that's great. The reality of systemic racism, factually and historically true, including its implications. So the essential core of the woke left, in terms of, in principle, what they're trying to accomplish, I think that's pretty right. I mean, it's hard to argue with, but it's the application of it, and it's the forcing of these in terms of policies which are self-defeating and self-disruptive, right? The censorship, it's horrible, right? The shaming. So the Democrats need to find a balance between that. And to your point, I think where this is evolving is a balancing act between the principles of the woke left growing up to the point where they could be adaptive to delicately influence policy and be transformative in a way that's analogous to Bernie's platform becoming the mainstream Democratic platform only 4 years later. Does that make sense? So
that makes perfect sense. I think like things like systemic racism and women's rights, all of that is, these are things that are actually embraced by the mainstream liberals too. But you're right. It's the matter of implementation, how they want to implement it. It's
childish. It's childish. It's like walking around on the campus, and it's like free love, and everyone's smoking weed, and then we were playing bocce ball. Remember, we used to play bocce ball at Champaign Urbana, right? Yeah. It's like, hey, cool, bro. Yeah, and it's that kind of. I will call it infantile. I'll call it unrealistic. It's aspirational, but it's childish, and the childish aspects of all this woke shit is the whiplash that you get from undercutting your own capacity to bring about transformative change. And that's what growing up is all about. It's not the world you want, but it's the world that is. And then it's what you do day to day to smooth that delta and bring it closer together in a way that's actually effective. That's right. I think that the liberals hopefully can learn that and get there. Hopefully it won't be too self-destructive going into it, because Trump is feeding off of that. He's actually creating it when it's not even there. And that goes first full circle to the beginning of our conversation, which is it's all about the brand. And I'll just close by saying, Trump, Donald J., congratulations, bro. From a marketing point of view and a brand point of view, you're rocking it, and you continue to rock it even though you're going to kill another 200,000 people. Bravo. Yeah. But everyone else, including Biden and the Democrats who want to dethrone this mofo, take this guy seriously. Don't pay attention to the polls right now. Don't become complacent, and start engineering a persona, Uncle Joe, whomever, who's empathetic, who reaches out and can differentiate effectively from this maniac, or he gonna win again.
That's the differentiation thing, I think, from this entire conversation, and this really, the differentiation thing is so key, because there are people who have tried to play Trump's game against him, and they've said that, oh, you know, like Michael Avenatti, you know, you need a guy who's like him to fight him. Listen, you're never going to out-Trump Trump.
Yes.
You're not going to.
No, it's Thanos versus Uncle Joe with great power. Uncle Ben, remember from Spider-Man? With great power comes great responsibility. Right? So he's got to be that guy. He's not going to be, you know, fucking Doc Ock. Yeah.
So, a little ambivalent about the Uncle Joe thing, but I think that we can definitely talk about that.
Something like that. I mean, I don't know. I mean, they're smarter guys than us, and there's, like, you know, a lot of opportunity to build it, but it's got to be fast. Get your shit together, Democrats. Get them. Right. Eventually, you got to get that guy out of the bunker, and when you do, it's hell's bells. Don't take Trump for granted. And I'm telling you, his shit that he's doing right now could be effective for getting him another 4 years. Don't dismiss it as crazy stuff. It's not crazy. It is on brand. He knows exactly what he's doing, and he's going to get you.
Thank you so much. This was awesome. We got to do this again.
I hope everyone listening had fun.
Yeah,
you know, and follow up, add comments, share, and reach out anytime. You can put some contact info. I'd love to, you know, keep the conversation going.
Can you say, for the people who are going to be listening to this and can't see the contact info, do you want to say, like, you know, what you do, you know, how they can get in touch with you?
Yeah, sure. To do marketing pitch. My name is Mike Spitz, Mookie. Everyone calls me Spitz. I have a little consultancy of mine called Blitz Strategy. So if you want Blitz from Spitz. And I do what I've been doing with Ali, which is just listening, asking questions, deconstructing. And I look at everything through this lens of branding and positioning. And most people do everything back asswards. So if you want to sell yourself, Andrew, if you're listening and you want me back, I'll show up on time.
Yeah.
Well, you know, let's just keep at it, and good luck. And, you know, if no one said living through a historically disruptive moment, a global pandemic, unprecedented leadership in the White House would be all thrills and spills or all fun, but it's definitely captivating, exciting, and you know, let's get the most out of it. It's absolutely amazing, folks, what we're living through right now. And look on the bright side, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm thinking like 10 years from now, people can look back and be like, well, you know, here's why the pandemic was a good thing. And it sounds so talented.
Well, it's kind of a good thing now. Time with the kids, you know, reflective moments.
For us, because I mean, we're kind of privileged. And
That's true. That's true. A lot of people are suffering. I don't mean to denigrate that at all. It's horrific. It's terrible, but you know.
But for the people, you're right. It is. It's been amazing.
For Jeff Bezos, it's been rocking.
All right, guys.
Take care, buddy. I want to thank you personally for making the time to have me. And, you know, it'd be fun to follow up, you know, as we even get closer to election, to see if any of our conversation and predictions have any merit, and how things evolve when Uncle Joe does creep out of the bunker. Let's see if he's on point.
Oh, we're gonna do this many times.
Okay, great.
Times, and we're gonna come back. So, and Josh is okay. So we've got some comments, like Josh Johnson is saying, Mookie, this was an awesome fucking episode, and I think a lot of people are gonna.
All right, great. I'm happy to entertain. I love doing this, and I love the interactivity. So let's keep the thing going. Hey, Josh, you know, you're in New York. Let's go party.
Yeah. With masks on.
Right.
All right, man. I'm gonna go, and Mookie's gonna go too. Spitz is gonna go. So we're gonna talk to you guys next time. Hear it.
Let's do it. End it on a big roll.
We have to have you play guitar on the next one. When you
Okay, sure. I can do my Van Halen or Joe Satriani impression. Actually, I'm more Joe Satriani these days with this.
With the
head,
hair. Yeah. Can I put a link to your Eddie Van Halen eruption cover thing?
Yeah, go ahead. It's I'm wearing a wig and it was Halloween. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah,
why
if
not?
you guys want to see Spitz shred on the guitar and play Eddie Van Halen's eruption on video.
Yeah, and if you're a great guitar player, it'll be like, oh, okay, glad you're wearing a wig. And if you're seeing it for the first time, you're like, wow, I wish he'd just STFU and play guitar more.
And speaking of STFU, that's what we're going to do right now. So
all right, thanks, folks, everyone, for listening. Thanks, Ali, for hosting. Really appreciate it. Take care.
Rock and roll.